2026 election is more than a year away, but still plenty to talk about as we go through a primary process and then head into the bulk of what's going to be a high-flying election year with gubernatorial election up. Governor J.B. Pritzker looking for a third term, but some names stacking up for Republicans who want to challenge him and plenty of issues in Illinois for us to focus on. It is Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning here, and we just had a segment where we heard what Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson had to say, what Governor J.B. Pritzker had to say about public safety in Illinois. And in particular, it looks like it's starting to be narrowed down to really focusing on illegal immigration and what the Trump administration plans to do in Chicago. But to discuss this some more is Ted Dabrowski, former president of WirePoint, but somebody who soon is expected to announce his intentions for a gubernatorial run. Ted, thanks for taking time with us this morning. When can we expect an official announcement from you?
Thanks, Greg. Excuse me. We should have an announcement within the next week, so I appreciate you having me on.
No, absolutely. And even if you weren't going to announce, you're somebody who's a wealth of information, and the way you analyze things is, we've featured it before here with Illinois in Focus and even with the Center Square. So let's just jump right into the issues. Obviously, you've watched what Governor J.B. Pritzker's had to say about public safety, about immigration enforcement. You've heard what Brandon Johnson has to say about it. Is this the right approach that the state of Illinois should be taking in opposing and putting up barriers to federal immigration enforcement?
Well, yeah, I think there's so many levels of wrong that both Johnson and Pritzker are doing, and if you followed WirePoints at all, you've seen that we've tracked the numbers, and I think the data has to do a lot to tell us what's going on. And for 13 years, and this will be the 14th year that we have led the country in total murders. 3 times more than Los Angeles in terms of murder rate, 5 times more the rate of New York City. And so we've got a big problem. We've seen the carjacking problem. We've seen the car theft problem. It's been massive. And yes, we have a decline this year compared to the highs of the last few years. But I don't think we should pretend that more than 260 murders in the South Side and West Side is somehow normal again. It's normalized. It's okay. We've seen all kinds of actions that have weakened the police morale, destroyed our policing, destroyed our prosecution, destroyed our sentencing, and therefore, the chance of a bad guy doing a bad deed and getting caught and doing time is almost zero now because the arrest rate is so low. We've got a deep problem, and we should be embracing support rather than fighting it. And I think the hypocrisy of all this whole discussion is we had the National Guard in for the DNC to protect the political elite. But to even mention that word National Guard when it comes to South Side and West Side, has somehow become a bad word. And that's a big problem we have.
Well, I don't know if you recall, I remember clearly the images of National Guard surrounding our state capitol here in Springfield right after the January 2021 when President Joe Biden was coming in, and they were stationed there for days. But obviously COVID going on then as well, and a lot of uncertainty about a whole host of things. But regardless, it's happened in the past where the National Guard has been brought into Illinois to help with public safety. So why do you think the apprehension there from the Johnson administration, the Pritzker administration? We saw what happened in Los Angeles, right? The National Guard came in to protect federal assets and personnel because there was riotous behavior going on. Should that be what we expect from Trump, having seen it already in L.A.?
Well, there's a few points. One is, look, we have made things worse in Illinois. We passed a Safety Act where we're the first state to entirely limit cash bail. So we've got more murderous or dangerous people on the streets than we should. We've ended car chases, foot chases. We've talked about, Johnson has pushed the defund the police in his starting before he started. We've really emboldened criminals. And Johnson has excused all the actions by calling the mob groups, young mob groups, as silly kids. So he is actually incentivized, or at least he's not tough on crime. And so we have made our own problems here, and we shouldn't relax just because the numbers are down this year. And by the way, the numbers are down nationally everywhere. This is not a Chicago phenomenon, so we can't take credit for what we did in Chicago. So, ShotSpotter was removed. There are so many things that we've moved in the wrong direction. And I would argue that Pritzker and Johnson are really more about protecting criminals than they are about protecting the actual victims. So we've brought it on ourselves. Now, I will say this, the National Guard is supposedly brought crime way down in D.C., and that's good news. But National Guard isn't a solution, right? It's not a long-term solution. It's a short-term solution to show the people that we care about them in the South and West sides. We're not gonna just say, hey, oh, crime is down, so we're not gonna protect you. But the real solution has to be to unwind all these bad policies that Pritzker and Johnson have done. Support the police again, bring the police morale way back up, because that's the starting point. People want more policing. We see that in polls all the time. We did a poll at Wire Points. People want more policing. They want good, fair policing, of course, but they want more protection. We should give them that. And we have to flip the model on its head. And Johnson and Pritzker are pursuing policies that allow more crime rather than stop crime.
Pritzker told CBS, and he's said it before, he wants to see more ATF. He wants to work more with FBI. He says that they already do that to a degree, and they could use more of that assistance. But there seems to be that fine line drawn about immigration enforcement. Why do you think that is?
They're trapped. We've trapped ourselves. Pritzker and Johnson with the sanctuary state, sanctuary city policies. They've gone all the way in. We have to back up and say there's one thing. Governor Pritzker's running for president. He's running for the far left of the primary. He's staked out his claim there. That's his path. That means everything he does has to be against Trump. And he can't be seen as doing anything that would be against the unions, against his base. And so therefore he's trapped. He's trapped in the sanctuary state, sanctuary city type policy. At Wire Points, we've shown how much money we've spent on, we've incentivized illegal immigrants. We released the data on how much has been spent on health care for illegal immigrants. Now it's got to be close to $2 billion. We've prioritized the wrong people. We should be taking care of our own residents. And it's understandable why so many Latinos and so many Black residents are upset, because we keep prioritizing illegal immigrants over our own very residents who are struggling under a Pritzker administration and under a Johnson administration.
We're talking with Ted Dabrowski. He is former president of Wire Points, expecting an announcement on a gubernatorial run in the next week or so. And I appreciate you being here. Obviously, the crime issue top of mind for Chicagoans in certain areas. You've got the ongoing question of the federal government and how they're going to enforce immigration. But one thing that Pritzker has said is we can use more money for violence intervention, for instance. And he criticized former Governor Bruce Rauner from more than 6 years ago, and also criticized President Trump for withholding certain types of violence intervention funding. For those who don't understand what violence intervention funding is, give us just a brief overview and whether or not it's successful.
Well, what it means is the government doling out more money to groups, spending tens and hundreds of millions, giving it to grassroots groups, you might call them that, or intervention groups, a lot of not-for-profits. And the big problem we have is that if you've looked at, exclude this year because things, the numbers are dramatically better in crime. They're better in crime across the country. But we've been spending lots of money on that, and nobody's clear about the outcomes at all. And when I say again, even if we have lower crime today, we'll still have, for the 14th year in a row, leading the country in murders. We have a sickness, and we have to really approach it. We shouldn't be leading the country in murders. And when you look at the 20 largest cities in the country, we have the highest murder rate. So we have the worst of both things. We need to be tough on crime, and that starts again with the police morale and supporting our police. If we don't start there, and if we don't prosecute right, if we don't prosecute, and if we don't sentence, that whole chain of arrest, prosecute, sentence, it doesn't work. And we've seen the revolving doors over and over. And we see CWB has done a great job of exposing all these people who are, alleged felons back out on the street, creating another felony, another murder, another shooting. And these kind of things have to stop.
Wanted to switch to education, Ted, as Governor J.B. Pritzker late last week before the holiday held a news conference about how much money his administration has increased in K through 12 funding. He highlighted some outcomes he says is showing Illinois is making progress. I know the work that you've done in the past really delving into these numbers and even looking at some of the education numbers at Illinois' report card from the State Board of Education. What do you take away from that? What's your assessment of whether or not more tax dollars going to K through 12 schools has actually improved the outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, more money has actually maybe made things worse. I think we've got such a bloated bureaucracy. Let me back up. I want to say that literacy in Illinois has to be one of our biggest priorities. And I mean literacy by measuring the numbers, by the actual metrics, not by how much we spend, but how many kids can read. And I want to reel off for you the actual numbers from last year, a few places. Rockford, Black children, only 10% could read at grade level last year. Peoria, Black children, only 9% could read at grade level. Quincy, white children, only 30% could read at grade level. I can go on and on. Waukegan, 16% for Hispanics. Decatur, this is, I think, the most interesting. White children, only 14% read at grade level. That is after we're spending $24,000 a kid in education across the entire state. And of course, we could talk about Chicago, where we spend over $30,000 a kid, and and only 1 in 5 kids can read at grade level. It's a disaster, and we shouldn't celebrate high graduation rates. We should not celebrate how much money we spend. We should again return to how many kids can read at grade level, and and how do we get that number way up? And every year should be a trajectory of higher and higher and higher. And those should be the goals, not spending, not all those other things, all this DI stuff we're doing in schools. We should focus on literacy and numeracy, because these cities will not succeed. They won't have a workforce if only 10% of kids can read at grade level.
And how do we get that focus on literacy? Is it a law that needs to be implemented? Is it maybe taking away certain mandates that there are put onto local school districts?
It's right, Greg. It's rethinking education, and there's no reason why Illinois can't be the leader in that. You've got places like Mississippi who are taking the leadership. There's things like, look, if you can't read in the 3rd grade, then you're in big trouble. And so, Florida, Mississippi have laws that say, hey, you can't go to 4th grade if you can't read in the 3rd. And, that makes everybody focus on reading. And, you bring the unions, you bring the teachers, you bring the companies in the city, bring everybody, volunteers, everybody obsesses about literacy. And if we don't get to that, it's all a joke. We're wasting money, and most of the kids can't read. There's also the talk of school choice, right? We need to give more choices, because the longer it takes us to fix these public schools, the longer kids are trapped there. And we know that the wealthy people can move to a private school, move to another district, move to a good public school district. But everyday Illinois can't, and we should really help them have choices, because in Indiana, every kid has a choice about what school they attend. Same thing in Iowa. They all have school choice. In Illinois, not a single kid has school choice, unless they're wealthy, of course.
Ted, the election's coming up in 2026. Got a primary we got to get through. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to talk about a whole host of other issues. But, obviously, when we're talking about education, you can't not recognize the state having the highest property taxes, which the state of Illinois really focuses on, how to fund local schools using local property taxes. How do we get that down? Is it more state money going to education and trying to relax?
Watch out there.
Yeah. So tell us what the answer is there to lower the property taxes in the state of Illinois.
You'll hear a lot of politicians say, well, we just need to take more ownership at the state level, basically increase spending at the state level and decrease spending at the local level. That's just another trick, because, that doesn't change how much this government is spending, right? They're just moving it from one pocket to the other. So I'm very cautious about that. We need to take the steps that lower overall taxes, period, not have any games being played. And so, there's a lot that can be done. One of the things that is the biggest albatross around our neck are these pension debts. And, we continue to dole out pensions. Governor Pritzker just signed a bill to increase Chicago pensions. And Chicago can't afford them. They're already broke. I think we're going to see checks get slashed at some point. Pension checks get slashed because the hole is so big now. So I think we need to do something like 401ks for new workers. It's constitutional. It's what everybody else, it's what ordinary everyday Illinoisans have is a 401k style plan. And we should be fair and have what's good for the private sector should be good for the public sector. There's things like Pritzker signed increased spiking for salaries for teachers at the end of their career. So that was another thing that was done. We have the most units of government in the country. In Illinois, by far. You add up some of our neighbors, we have more. We add them up, and we still have more units of government. And there we have bloat, duplicative administration, superintendents, assistant superintendents, all this administrative bloat that shouldn't be going on with huge pensions. So that's the kind of stuff we need to look at and make it fair to everyday Illinoisans, because if not, everyday Illinoisans will keep leaving. We've got counties that want to secede. We've got the highest outmigration in the country, except for New York and California. This state, let me be clear about this, Greg. This state should be a top 5 state for growth, for economic prosperity, for education, where you raise your kids. And right now we're a bottom 5 state in just about everything, and that's why people are leaving. Highest property taxes, second highest gas taxes, doubled by Governor Pritzker, the highest cell phone taxes. I could go on, and that's what's making everyday Illinoisans suffer. And they shrug their shoulders. They've lost hope, and I want to bring back hope, because we can fight back on these things. We got to expose them, talk about them, make the legislature address them, make the media address them. Thank you for having me on, Greg, to talk about these issues. But the media doesn't address them either. And that's one of the big goals is to make sure everybody knows what the problems are, because you can't fix problems that you won't acknowledge.
You mentioned the governor in the education and the property taxes and the outbound migration that there is. I don't know if you saw the governor late last week down in Southern Illinois. He was asked about the separation movement, and he said, either you can stick around and help make the state better, or you can, if you want to move. What's your response to somebody who, is the governor of Illinois telling people, if you don't like it here, go ahead and pack up and move?
I think it tells you everything you need to know about Governor Pritzker. He's had almost 7 years to lower property taxes. He doubled gas taxes, as I mentioned. He's had a chance to make this state the state that it should be. But outmigration is increased with him. If it wasn't for the illegal immigrants coming in, our population would be even more shrunk. He's doing all the wrong things, and I think when he says that people move out, I mean that's I don't like the name call, but that's crazy talk. You don't tell your residents to move out. You go down there and you listen to them and you address their concerns and you work with them. And look, if we had low taxes and whatever, it'd be one thing. But Governor Pritzker, under him, he has refused to lower property taxes. They've only gone up. He's raised taxes overall. We have some of the highest taxes in the country. And people can't afford to live here anymore. It's too expensive to live here. They look elsewhere. In Indiana, and the borders are right there, and those other states are growing their populations. We're not.
Ted Dabrowski, former president of WirePoint's potential Republican gubernatorial candidate. We'll be waiting to see that announcement come out, and I'm sure it's going to give us the opportunity to talk about not just taxes and economy, but also some of the other issues. I know the audience here with Illinois in Focus has been watching closely what happens with the Second Amendment issues, so that's something else we'll have to talk about with you, but there's a whole host of other things as we march forward the primary in March, and then also the election in November. So greatly appreciate you taking the time with us.
Well, thank you, Greg. I just want to remind everybody, this is a fantastic, great state. We just got really bad politics and politicians that are driving it down. So if you want change, we can get there.
Ted Dabrowski, greatly appreciate your time. We'll talk again in the near future. This is Illinois in Focus Daily.
Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets.
It's President Donald Trump talking about Chicago's crime and how he would have respect for Governor J.B. Pritzker if he was to pick up the phone and call the president. Of course, Governor Pritzker responding. That's what we're getting to here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with Illinois in Focus Daily each and every weekday morning. Go live about 8 o'clock this morning. I was a few minutes late, so I appreciate those who do tune in live to the live chat, which is always active. You guys are always on me. That's good. So let's get right to it. All right. So yesterday you had President Donald Trump announcing some new movements to bring a military military base to a different state, and then all of a sudden he takes questions from the media. One of the questions was, do you plan on going into Chicago? And here he is essentially reiterating what he's said in the past, but making it, I guess, a little bit more clear what he's looking to do.
I didn't say when, but the answer is, look, Chicago's very interesting because I watched Pritzker get up and say about, we don't need help, we're safe. But 2 weeks ago, they had 6 people murdered, and they had 24 people hit by bullets. Last week, as you know, it was 7 people, 24 people hit, and 7 people died. And then over the last 2 days, that was the crown jewel. They had, I guess, 9 or 10 killed, and 50 hit with bullets. And you have this governor get up, who's a terrible governor. Probably he and Gavin Newsom would be probably the 2 worst and most naive. They're naive. Either they're naive or they're very untruthful. And he'll say, we don't want any protection. We don't need. So in the last 3 weeks, he's lost almost 20 people killed. There's no place in the world, including you can go to Afghanistan, you can go to places that you would think of. They don't even come close to this. Chicago is a hellhole right now. And I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops because you know what? The people, they have to be protected.
First,
you've got Governor Pritzker, who held a news conference literally minutes after Trump got done with his news conference there, and Pritzker responded directly to the president to that suggestion that he would have some respect for Pritzker if Pritzker picked up the phone and asked for assistance to help with what Trump characterized as out-of-control violence.
First, I want to address the president's unhinged remarks a few minutes ago, begging me to call him. No, I will not call the president asking him to send troops to Chicago. I've made that clear already. I refuse to play a reality game show with Donald Trump again. What I want are the federal dollars that have been promised to Illinois and Chicago for violence prevention programs that have proven to work. That is money that Illinois taxpayers send to the federal government, and it's an insult to any and every citizen to suggest that any governor should have to beg the president of any political party for resources owed their people.
They've abandoned the victims, abandoned the police, and abandoned the people of Chicago, and many of the people in our districts as well. Just think about it for a minute. What these Democrats really stand for. They're the ones who have allowed illegal immigrant criminals into our communities. They're the ones that want to release people from jail over and over again. They're the ones that restrict Second Amendment rights, but won't keep people who attacked innocent civilians behind bars. It's the Democrats who hate law and order. President Trump, the Illinois Freedom Caucus, Republicans understand that law and order is the pillar of the free world. Without safe streets, there is no prosperity, there is no opportunity, and there is no justice.
So that's, again, you got Governor Pritzker responding to Trump, and then yesterday you had the Illinois Freedom Caucus hold a news conference with State Senator Andrew Chesney saying that Democrats have abandoned Chicago residents who are concerned about public safety. Chicago Red was also Flip Chicago Red was it Chicago Flips Red? There's multiple organizations, and I'm sure they're going to come together eventually, especially heading into an election year in 2026, where you've got a growing contingent of people wanting Chicago to go Republican. So Chicago Flips Red was part of the Illinois Freedom Caucus event yesterday, a news conference, and Zoe Lee, one of the founders, said that weakened violence is a perfect reason why there needs to be recognition from Illinois leaders that they need assistance to get the crime under control.
As you see, it was 54 people that were shot, 8 people died. And one of the things that really bothers me is that it was 6 women that were shot and killed. One was ambushed by 5 gunmen, 1 woman. Another one were just fights, catty fights, having guns, shooting each other. And I watched our leaders, in the Democratic leaders here, protest Donald Trump for being a dictator. So on top of the crime that we're already dealing with, the poverty crimes that the Democratic Party has made in our communities, we're dealing with illegal alien criminals. We're dealing with the cartel. We're dealing with sex trafficking, drug trafficking. We're dealing with human trafficking. And we need help. We need the federal government to intervene. I've been saying this for 2 years. Danielle has been saying this, and other Republican leaders have been saying this.
And again, that's Zoe Lee from Chicago Flips Red. Danielle Carter Walters was also there, and she said that while a lot of talk about, especially from the governor, saying we need those federal funds, those taxpayer dollars for violence intervention programs, Danielle's saying that there needs to be an audit of what was already spent.
And we are calling for President Trump to come in and also give us a forensic audit on all these departments.
Crime prevention money, Erica, because we know this, with all this crime that's going on, we know the money is not being spent towards the crime prevention, we are also down 2,000 officers. And
that's something else that is, obviously going to be an issue of discussion is law enforcement, the levels of law enforcement, more FBI, more federal agents, ATF, these types of the sister agencies that can help with some domestic law enforcement legally. But when you start talking about the National Guard, that's where Governor Pritzker is suggesting it's time to stand up and protest President Donald Trump and saying we don't want the Guard to come to Illinois.
Guess what? People ought to be speaking out about what this administration is doing. I'm doing it from this podium, but people can go protest. People are holding up signs on street corners with their friends to protest. There are thousands of people, indeed millions of people, that showed up for No King's Day. And I'm encouraging people to peacefully, have said that all along, megaphones, microphones, go to the ballot box. Those are all the things that I said. Let's be clear. And to the extent that people want to protest, they have that First Amendment right to do so. All I'm saying, as I said back then, is that you ought to do it peacefully and that you ought to make your voices heard. Thank you.
So we've also got what could happen legally. Now, you heard Trump. He said, we're going in. I just didn't say when. We've heard Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, suggest that it could be as early as this coming Friday. And you've got a variety of other voices that the governor laid out that they're getting intel from, that they're staging at the Great Lakes Naval Station to have ICE officers come in. And could it look like what happened in L.A. with National Guard protecting ICE assets amid potential protests that could get out of hand? And if local law enforcement is going to be involved, how are they going to be involved? Johnson has issued an executive order to restrict Chicago police from how they interact with federal employees, I guess. But is there lawsuit potential here? Governor J.B. Pritzker discussed this, but also Attorney General Kwame Raoul discussed this as well. Can they preemptively sue to try to keep the Trump administration from doing what the Trump administration says they're going to do, just not sure when it's actually going to happen?
Well, there's no such thing as a preemptive lawsuit. If something occurs that trips the wire that allows us to go into court, and I'll just look at the Attorney General when I say this to get his confirmation, we absolutely will go into court, but that hasn't occurred yet.
Of course, that wasn't
We're going in is not enough. No, we don't know this particular factual basis that he would be suggesting to federalize the Guard, and so we have to be able to respond to facts, not predicting what he's going to be relying upon and what they're going to be doing specifically.
So clearly, they can't act in the courts until an action is taken by Trump. And then once there's obviously some action they feel goes over the line, then they're going to file a lawsuit. They just can't preemptively do that. Some of the legislative back and forth here. Talked with State Representative Stephanie Kifowit, who's a veteran of the U.S. military, and she is a Democrat from Oswego. She said that she kind of sees it on both sides, but is cautious about what's happening on the ground.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest, Greg. We are looking at the city of Chicago, which has a population of 3 million people. So the statistics that you just said, the individuals that got wounded and shot, it's a serious situation. Don't get me wrong. But when we look at the statistics, the crime rate in Chicago is much less than some of the crime rate in other parts of the state, other parts of the state that are actually under Republican governance. So if we're gonna talk about stats, we need to talk about stats in an equal discussion. And the crime rate in Chicago is lower than a lot of other significant cities.
And that was in response to me kind of sharing what President Trump shared from over the weekend. And then when you work in a couple of weeks worth, you've got 20 people killed and 100 that have been shot. So how do you respond to that? That sounds bad. She says you got to look at crime rates. And if that's the case, even though Chicago has the most total number of homicides of all cities, when you look at the crime rate, it provides a different picture. And here's Kifowit talking more about that.
We got to compare apples to apples. A city of 3 million people and with a decline, working to decline our crime rate, I think needs to be looked at positively if our crime's going down. And I do believe that local law enforcement is the expert in addressing local crime, not National Guardsmen from outside of Illinois or those that are currently serving in the military.
And Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin, he shared that he's taken a different perspective, that Illinois needs help. Chicago needs help.
I have heard the word threat from the media. It's a threat coming from Washington, a threat. I'm trying to understand why an American in uniform standing on a street corner trying to protect other Americans is a threat to anyone. I think it is a threat to those that have failed. And the worst thing that they're worried about is it'll have an immediate success and it'll be a mark against their poor efforts into public safety.
What's the solution? Is it having federal law enforcement come and assist Chicago? Is it having more money go out for violence intervention funds that could go to nonprofits to help violence interrupters take to the streets? Is that the answer? Or maybe Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has the solution. He proposed something that he says the president really should be focusing on instead of threatening to send in the National Guard to help curb crime.
No matter how much work we do or how hard we work, whether it's expanding our Detectives Bureau, investing in community violence intervention, and addressing the root causes of crime, none of it will ever be enough until the president decides to end the mass trafficking of guns in our city. For every gun that the Chicago Police Department fights to get off the streets, 2 or 3 more new guns come into our city. Chicago will continue to have a violence problem as long as red states continue to have a gun problem. Shootings will continue as long as this presidential administration continues to put politics over people.
So it's the guns that's the problem, according to Johnson, and something that needs to be addressed. That was just some of the back and forth on all sides of this over the past 24 hours. And I think that's why you wake up with us here for Illinois in Focus Daily.
This is the best issue of all. They are against preventing crime. They are fighting us. I want to go into Chicago, and I have this incompetent governor that doesn't want us.
He wants to set into the fact pattern that the governor called him to ask for help. Why? Because he's going to end up in court. He's going to end up in court.
And that will be a fact that they will use in court, that the governor called to ask for help. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to provide him with evidence to support his desire to have the court rule in his favor. I'm just not going to do that.
So back and forth yesterday between President Donald Trump and Governor J.B. Pritzker concerning public safety in Chicago with the prospect of increased federal law enforcement. Now, is it going to be just increased ICE agents? Are they going to have support from other federal agents, or is the National Guard going to come in? We'll hear a lot of this here with the Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, here each and every weekday morning with you. Appreciate you guys tuning in and relying on Illinois in Focus and the Center Square to keep updated of what's going on in the states, in particular with state governments. And we talk a lot about laws that are being implemented and the court process and so on. But when you got the ongoing conflict between President Donald Trump, a Republican, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, it's been pretty heated lately. Everything from the redistricting fights that we had the focus of for about 2 weeks last month, and then you've got now this National Guard issue that's the focus, and we have yet to even really see the possibility of the no cash bail executive order that President Donald Trump signed that could withhold money from the state of Illinois, because the state of Illinois has no cash bail statewide. So there's going to be plenty for us to continue to track. But let's get to it. You had Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday. He was taking part in a discussion with community violence interrupter groups. And these are the nonprofit groups that get various tax dollars to get out on the streets and try to interrupt the violence. But afterwards, he talked to the media and laid out what he understands is going to happen with federal law enforcement.
What we're hearing is that they'll be assembled, ready to go on Friday, and that they would begin actions on Saturday. Over the weekend. So that's all we know. And what we're doing is, of course, making sure that the CPD and local law enforcement are aware of what they're doing, so they can, one, make sure they're not standing anywhere near those actions or assisting in those actions, but also being ready for protests that might occur. And then, very importantly, we've asked for the public to be ready with your iPhone and any way that you can to record what's going on in their neighborhoods by ICE, because we think that's the best way to demonstrate what ICE is doing if they're doing something wrong, or to keep them honest and doing the right thing because they know they're being watched.
So obviously it's evidence that it's going to be increased immigration enforcement. But how is ICE going to be supported? Is it going to be the National Guard coming in? And where's Pritzker getting this information? He didn't really want to share the details of who's telling him these things.
I'm not going to tell you where it comes from, and it's not because it doesn't exist. It's because we've gotten calls from people who don't want to reveal their names to the public. These are people from inside the administration or inside the military or inside the National Guard who are concerned about what's happening in this country. These are patriots who want us to know what's happening. We're getting no information from the federal government, and all we got was one call from Gregory Bovino, who let us know that ICE would be instituting actions in the city of Chicago without any details at all. So I want to be clear, I'm not going to reveal where we're getting this information from, but I am going to be communicative to the public about what we have heard and what we do know so that they can be prepared themselves.
So Pritzker saying that he wants to see residents watch and film ICE activities. Law enforcement locally surely are going to try to keep any protests at bay, but then when you get down to it, could there possibly be some violent actors? And what happens then? And it's something we saw in L.A., and then Trump came in with the National Guard to protect federal assets and personnel. But a district federal judge recently just ruled against the Trump administration on that. So we'll see what the kind of effect that has and if that goes up the chain in the judiciary. So how we move from here, interesting. But Pritzker did recognize they can't stand in the way. State officials can't stand in the way of federal law enforcement agencies conducting federal law enforcement activities.
Well, as you know, we cannot stand in the way. It's not like we're going to have armed men standing in between. That's not something that's legal. That's not something the state of Illinois can engage in or the city of Chicago can engage in. What we're trying to do is to get them to follow the law, and when they are not following the law, we can take them to court, prosecute them if they're doing something truly illegal, which one of the things we're very concerned about is, you saw what happened in LA. There was a whole lot of activity that appeared to be illegal. And so some of that went to court in California. Some decisions have already been made, at least about National Guard, and some of those court cases are still ongoing. So we're going to do everything we can to protect people's safety. That is something that the Chicago Police Department, Illinois State Police, and other local law enforcement are responsible for, but can't stand in the way of the execution of, for example, a warrant that ICE is trying to execute.
So the governor has said in the past, we've got the Trust Act, we've got the Way Forward Act, and this is law in the state of Illinois that essentially prohibits state law enforcement from cooperating with federal law enforcement concerning immigration detainers, but not criminal immigration detainers. They can work with them on criminal immigration detainers, but not civil immigration detainers. And you can kind of see where the complexity there might make some things confusing, especially on the ground as this is being implemented. And you had the czar, the border czar, Tom Homan, feels like months ago, saying that they're going to flood the zone in Chicago. Why? Because Chicago does not communicate with ICE as to when they have an illegal alien in their custody at a jail, for instance, or if they're going to be released from an Illinois prison. ICE doesn't get a heads up. So Homan said months ago that they're essentially going to flood the zone as to how they're going to have to enforce federal law. Clearly, it's going to get really hairy. And you had Vice President J.D. Vance. He visited Minneapolis yesterday, and he was asked about what exactly is going to go on in Chicago, and is there going to be some federal law enforcement? So here's a little bit of what J.D. Vance had to say and what the plans are when he was asked about it yesterday. And this is audio from a pool reporter.
Look, there are no immediate plans, but the president has said he has the legal authority to protect American citizens, whether that's in Chicago or in Washington, D.C. Obviously, as the president has said, we want the governor to be a partner here. We would love it, Democrat or Republican, if we had governors who were willing to actually be partners in cutting down crime in our country. Unfortunately, it looks like that's not what we have in J.B. Pritzker, but out of respect for the families that I visited today, we'll sort of leave it there on the national conversation. Again, I'll just say one final thing. I'm going to repeat it. Hug your kids. There are two families who are heartbroken and devastated. There are no words that we have.
He went on from there to talk about that horrible shooting in Minneapolis, but J.D. Vance obviously saying he's going to let the president speak more clearly on what exactly the plans are. And President Donald Trump, meeting with the president of Poland yesterday, talked about public safety in Chicago. And here we go.
Against preventing crime.
Do it again.
This is the best issue of all. They are against preventing crime. They are fighting us. I want to go into Chicago, and I have this incompetent governor that doesn't want us. Do you know that this weekend 72 people were shot in Chicago? I'm embarrassed to say it in front of the president of Poland. 11 people were killed. 72 people were shot. Last week, 7 people were killed in Chicago, a place which is probably your number one place. I hate to say it.
Yeah, let the polls say Chicago.
And we got to keep it safe. But 7 people were killed. The week before that, 5 people were killed, and 21 people were shot. This is in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, they lost almost 35 people were killed. It could have been stopped. If you look at Washington, D.C., 3 weeks ago, it was the same or worse. and now it's considered a totally safe zone.
And he went on to talk about how he cleaned up the streets of Washington, D.C. using the National Guard, and he anticipates he could do that in the city of Chicago.
Washington, D.C. is a totally safe city. You're not reporting any crime because there is none. They said crime is down 87%, and I said, no, it's not. It's down 100%. We have a great thing going. I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago, or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have New Orleans, which has a crime problem. We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks. Easier than D.C. But we could straighten out Chicago. All they have to do is ask us to go into Chicago if we don't have the support of some of these politicians. But I'll tell you who is supporting us, the people of Chicago. And I sort of want them to let it be known they have incompetent people.
We've heard from Chicago Flips Red. We've heard from residents in Chicago addressing the city council, even as late as yesterday during a public safety committee hearing for the city of Chicago. They were talking about police and how they put too much on police, and they need to have some more targeted types of things police only address, instead of having them address things like, for instance, parking violations. Is that really the best use of police time? So they're having that discussion, but clearly it's because the police are stressed there. You've got 1,800 fewer police officers than Chicago may need, and Trump saying that he wants the residents there to keep speaking up about the need for more public safety, and you had that exactly happen on the city council committee. Tijuan Sims addressing the council, saying, hey, it's not an excuse. It's something that needs to happen.
So the Governor Pritzker thinks that it's an excuse for the president to come in and aid Americans. There were 58 Americans shot over the weekend, 8 dead. However, the Pritzker seems to think that that's an excuse. However, someone should inform him that that is a presidential obligation to protect the American people. We got Mayor Johnson. He said this. He said, you know what? Trump can help us by sending federal aid to stop the endless flow of guns coming out of red states. He named the states, which puzzled me. He said Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi. Then he went on to say the number of guns, possibly tens of thousands of guns that are coming into the city. He can stop. If you have all of this detail, why haven't you stopped it? If you have all of this information, why aren't you the one aiding the American citizens? We had 18 women, mostly, shot in River North right after the debacle about curfew. However, was there an EO sign for that to protect the American citizens? No, it wasn't. But we have Mayor Johnson signing an executive order to protect the undocumented. Why? What is this? I truly would like to know. We have Pritzker. Oh, wow. So the city and the state is being ran by what? Anti-Americans? Thieves, I suppose, because there's got to be some gain in this. For y'all to stand up, for like all the work they did for Abreu Garcia, his due process, $5 million in representation, and Americans are being murdered in the cities. But instead of saying, you know what, we side with you, President Trump, on this one. You got our back. For the 5,000 more police officers that can be used for ShotSpotter that was taken when Larry Sneller did.
So, of course, get limited time at the Chicago City Council to speak, but that's, again, just one of a cavalcade of residents over the past 2 years, quite frankly, that have been calling for the federal governments to come in. But Pritzker refusing to call President Donald Trump for help, and he says because he doesn't want to give Trump legal standing.
No, I would pick up the phone and call them. I don't understand why everybody doesn't understand this. It's as if he's begging me to call him because he wants me to ask him for National Guard. That is what he is trying to do. There's a second reason. and you should pay close attention to this. He wants to set into the fact pattern that the governor called him to ask for help. Why? Because he's going to end up in court. He's going to end up in court. And that will be a fact that they will use in court, that the governor called to ask for help. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to provide him with evidence to support his desire to have the court rule in his favor. I'm just not going to do that.
From there to talk about what he really would like, not National Guard coming in, and apparently not ICE either, but other federal agencies, come on in.
What we do want is civilian law enforcement assistance. We want to make sure that we have enough FBI, ATF, DEA on the ground. We have some already, as you know. They do really good work, working in tandem with state police, working in tandem with Chicago Police Department. But we can use more. We can interdict more drugs and more guns that are coming across the border into the city, into the state of Illinois. And there's more work that we can do to make sure that we're fighting crime with, again, civilian law enforcement. And I've been very clear about that. The president wants me to call him about National Guard. I'm not going to do that.
We'll see what happens. Continue to track it here each and every weekday morning.
This is the best issue of all. They are against preventing crime. They are fighting us. I want to go into Chicago, and I have this incompetent governor that doesn't want to.
We're going to immediately go to court. If National Guard or other military troops are deployed to the city of Chicago, immediately go to court.
It's Governor J.B. Pritzker responding to President Donald Trump, who for weeks now said that he plans to send the National Guard to Chicago, as you've got federal officers lining up at a naval station just north of Chicago, preparing apparently to assist in some immigration raids. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us here each and every weekday morning as we bring you the latest of what's happening in the land of Lincoln, and this has been dominating headlines. Of course, with the centersquare.com, you can find the progression of all of this, but I think that this weekend there's going to be a lot of news. So let's get into it. Governor Pritzker yesterday went to a school to talk about education, and then he took to the podium where reporters were really focused more on what to expect this weekend when it comes to the Trump administration looking to use immigration customs enforcement to enforce immigration law in the city of Chicago, a city and state with migrant sanctuary policies, where it's not just in Chicago where people say that there are non-citizens there. You've got non-citizen populations. Some may be asylum seekers, other may have temporary protected status, others may be illegal. You've also got the deferred action of childhood arrivals and a variety of other categories of non-citizens. But regardless, the focus seems to be in Chicago. Here's Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday sharing his thoughts about what he's been told could possibly happen this weekend.
It appears that they again are on the schedule that we had heard. Again, they have not communicated that full schedule to us, although there apparently were some conversations with the local North Chicago officials. Nothing official communication with the state. But yes, we believe that they are going to be fully assembled by tomorrow and then can begin operations after that. And again, we heard that would begin early on Saturday morning, but it's possible, I suppose, that they might begin tomorrow.
You've got parades that are expected and gatherings that are expected for Mexican heritage celebrations, and that happening Saturday. So how's that going to be impacted by the Trump administration's possibility that there's going to be increased ICE enforcement this weekend? Again, that's according to the governor. He says that he's getting this detail and this information and this intel from people with knowledge of it. As you said, officials in North Chicago getting some heads up, but the Pritzker administration not. In what happens if indeed Trump sends the National Guard, Pritzker said they're going to sue.
We're going to immediately go to court. If National Guard or other military troops are deployed to the city of Chicago, immediately go to court. So that's going to be our first line of defense, is getting a court to issue a TRO or other injunction against that activity. There is no way for me to override. State law does not override federal law. So we have to abide by the law. We do that in the state of Illinois. We abide by the law. We abide by state law and federal law, unlike the President of the United States, who often acts in unconstitutional fashions. So we're going to do everything we can, again, to alleviate the challenge on the people of Chicago if, in fact, the president is trying to bring troops into Chicago, military troops.
And this is the governor from yesterday. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump was meeting with the president of Poland, and he had to, again, talk about the violence in Chicago and the public safety issues in Chicago and what he wants to do about that.
This is the best issue of all. They are against preventing crime. They are fighting us. I want to go into Chicago, and I have this incompetent governor that doesn't want us. Do you know that this weekend 72 people were shot in Chicago? I'm embarrassed to say it in front of the president of Poland. 11 people were killed. 72 people were shot. Last week, 7 people were killed in Chicago, a place which is probably your #1 place. I hate to say it.
Yeah, let the polls say Chicago.
And we got to keep it safe. But 7 people were killed. The week before that, 5 people were killed, and 21 people were shot. This is in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, I lost almost 35 people were killed. It could have been stopped.
And what's the response going to be? The president obviously talking about public safety, but it really seems that there's more going to be a push for immigration enforcement in Chicago, as Border Czar Tom Homan had said, and even recently, they're going to flood the zone. And because they aren't having cooperation with Illinois' migrant sanctuary policies, with Cook County's migrant sanctuary policies, with the city of Chicago's welcoming city ordinance, not allowing for local law enforcement to communicate with federal officials that they have somebody who's here as a non-citizen. They can't even ask somebody's citizenship status by law in the state of Illinois. So if they aren't able to coordinate with ICE to pick somebody up that's getting out of a county jail, or pick somebody up that's getting out of a state prison that's here illegally, then ICE says city of Chicago and other sanctuary cities are going to get what they don't want, and that's increased officers on the ground enforcing immigration law. And Homan even having said in the past, and we've talked about this as well, he says that's going to lead to more people being swept up, because if they go and enforce an immigration detainer against somebody and they find out that there's other non-citizens in that area, they're going too. So how this is going to look is going to be interesting. But Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's encouraging people to protest.
I'm telling people to know your rights, be extra careful, and know that there is the possibility that ICE will be on the ground and causing some mayhem. Don't play into their hand. And if you have the opportunity, please protest, pull out your phone, video everything that they're doing, whether it's an iPhone, an Android, whatever you've got, and make sure that the media sees it.
Last question. So you got the governor laying out that he's going to sue. He talks about the protests, that he is encouraging people to do peaceful protests, he says. But he was also asked when would be the right call to call in the National Guard yourself, or to call President Trump and ask for assistance with public safety. As the president said, I mean, several dozen people shot and killed just in the span of 2 or 3 weeks. Here's Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Well, again, when there have been challenges on the streets that where local law enforcement is overwhelmed or asks me to bring in the National Guard, I have done that. And I would do that again. But it's not a matter of me just deciding on my own, hey, it looks like we might need them. It's literally listening to the people on the ground who understand what's going on, who are actually meeting the problem where it exists, and determining that they don't have the manpower to deal with it on their own and need some help. So that's where a governor will call in the National Guard.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks,
There you go.
everyone.
There's the governor yesterday with the latest comments he shared concerning concerns of the National Guard being deployed to Chicago. But as we've kind of been reading the tea leaves, so to speak, it seems it's going to be more of a immigration enforcement effort, and maybe the Guard's going to be there just on standby to respond if there's any violence conducted towards these ICE officers and federal facilities, as we saw in Los Angeles just 2 months ago. So watching this closely this weekend, but when it comes to the politics of this, yes, these are human lives. Yes, these are individuals that may have families here, and if they're here illegally, they are likely going to face the consequences under the Trump administration. But you've got the politics of it as well, of the messaging, right? And Democrats have been saying that Trump's a threat to democracy. They're saying that the use of the National Guard for law enforcement is, violates posse comitatus. They say that Trump's a dictator and so on. And Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin from Barrington Hills, he said that in a way they're kind of characterizing the National Guard as a threat.
I have heard the word threat from the media. It's a threat coming from Washington, a threat. I'm trying to understand why an American in uniform standing on a street corner trying to protect other Americans is a threat to anyone. I think it is a threat to those that have failed. And the worst thing that they're worried about is it'll have an immediate success and it'll be a mark against their poor efforts into public safety.
Where this goes from here, of course, over the weekend, we'll be watching our team, myself, Jim Talamonte. We'll be getting you the latest, so get to thecentersquare.com and sign up for the newsletter, and we'll see you on Monday here live to talk more about that as we track what happens and unfolds. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily only with The Center Square.